maybe I should read this. This explains what this symposium was about. The public has long been concerned about the effects of radioactivity from nuclear explosions. The AAAS Committee on Science and the Promotion of Human Welfare and the Scientists Institute for Public Information, through their sponsorship of the Bauer Memorial Symposium, will provide some of the hard facts with which to answer old questions and settle new controversies about radioactivity. Specifically, we were discussing the effects of I-131, which was a very dangerous radioisotope produced in bomb explosions and damaged the thyroid gland. Now, I had, we could go into it's just a short story, but I had some very distinguished scientists. First, I had the National Center for Radiological Health of the U.S. Public Health Service, Edward Weiss, who had been studying children in St. George, Utah, who had been exposed to high levels of radioactive iodine.
Hang on a second. What?
Involved because, are we on camera now?
Oh, we have to get a little pre-roll, maybe about 5 seconds.
Yeah. Are you running now?
Yeah, waiting for the pre-roll. Is that all right? Is that what you want?
Oh, you're going to do the pre-roll. You haven't started it.
It is running now.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Shall we go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we might start with the beginning of how I became interested in environmental activism, if we want to put it that way. I was teaching at Utah State University in my field of biology, and was raising with my wife, at that time, 2 small children. And they were blowing these nuclear weapons off in Nevada, just across the border with Utah. And you could see these clouds coming over. It looked kind of funny. And before long, we learned that the milk was being severely contaminated with iodine-131, which is a very highly radioactive isotope produced by nuclear weapons explosions and is very damaging to the thyroid gland. So we immediately switched our children's milk supply from the local milk to powdered milk that we checked out was being produced in Southern California, which was not getting any fallout, because if you know how the pattern of winds, etc., from Nevada to the west across the country, you know that it blows mostly from west to east. And the government could not, as I look back on it, pick the worst place to do atmospheric testing of nuclear weapons than Utah, or Nevada, because it pretty well guaranteed that the radioactive fallout covered the country from Nevada east. Well, as a result of my interests, I started to do some research when I transferred to the medical school at the University of North Dakota, because, well, I was getting weekly reports from the U.S. Public Health Service, which recorded the amounts of radioactivity in milk throughout the United States, and then it was spread out throughout the world. And it turned out that the milk being produced in Mandan, North Dakota, about 100 miles from where we were living, was the most contaminated with strontium-90, which is in many ways worse than iodine-131. It gets into the bones and in experimental animals certainly cause bone cancer. I published a scientific article, which was in a local journal, which was picked up by some major newspapers. And I tried to analyze what the reasons for this high level of radioactivity in milk in Mandan, North Dakota was. And I didn't have much success, but anyway, it had some interesting data. And about that time, I learned that we're still in the 50s, that a scientist named Barry Commoner was doing the same sort of thing, but on a much bigger scale that I was, and that some other scientists that I was in touch with were doing. Basically, what we were trying to do was to educate the public about the effects of these scientific health effects of these radioactive atmospheric bomb tests, basing almost all of our material on government data that the government was not putting out in any meaningful form. I mean, they published these esoteric reports, which if you didn't know some science, you couldn't understand them. Now, Barry Commoner had organized the St. Louis Committee for Nuclear Information and put together a very strong, very good organization. They started a magazine called Environment, which considered mostly the problems of nuclear weapons testing. And he did projects, for instance, that were very imaginative. One of the things that radioactive strontium does is not only get into bones, but into teeth. And he, or some of his dentist friends, anyway, he's the one that organized it, got the idea of having mothers take the deciduous teeth after they'd fallen out of the babies and send them in to the St. Louis Committee, and he got the money to have them analyzed for radioactivity. And this was an exceedingly effective way to get into almost every household in the United States. And I think it would be true to say that the majority of parents, when they were feeding their children milk, if they'd had any contact with Commoner's group or some of the others of us in our independent activities, they undoubtedly worried what was happening to the children from this milk. Well, I would say that Commoner was the single man most responsible for getting the Nuclear Weapons Test Ban Treaty passed, ratified by the Congress of the United States. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Could we take a break?
Previous. Anytime.
Well, to get back to my own activities, about a year after I got involved with the radioactive problem in North Dakota, I was offered a position here at the University of Montana. And we organized a committee modeled after the St. Louis Committee called the Western Montana Scientists Committee for Public Information. And our main thrust at the time was to educate people using various techniques on the dangers of the radioactive fallout from nuclear weapons tests. I should emphasize, I think, that this was a highly controversial subject. I remember Adlai Stevenson, running for president against Richard Nixon, advocated a nuclear test ban treaty and was called a traitor by Nixon in public. I mean, you were a commie pretty much if you were against defending our country by developing nuclear weapons. The sort of thing we did, I traveled extensively throughout the state. The first summer I was here, I guess, at the request of the Farmers Union of Montana. And they arranged during the summer for me to appear and show slides and talk in as simple fashion as possible about just the facts about radioactivity. And one of the important points that we all sort of spontaneously together, without ever communicating with each other, agreed that the way to attack this problem was by presenting the facts and not haranguing the people about how bad the weapons were and all that. I mean, just tell them what they did, using mostly government data. So we wanted to present information in an unbiased, scientific fashion in terms that the public could understand. And I remember I traveled as far as Plentywood to talk to these Sunday Farmers Union gatherings, picnics. And it was a lot of fun, and I thought very valuable work. The people were really concerned, the farmers, about, they did, in the first place, it was obvious they didn't know what the situation was, other than they had the vague feeling that, something, it was dangerous. And I explained how the strontium got into the grass, and then the cows ate the grass, so it got into the milk, and then from the milk the people drank it, it's transferred into bone, where it sat there with a half-life of something like 28 years, radiating this delicate tissue. And then we also cut it for a moment. What was this? I did the Farmers Union thing. And in addition to traveling...
We have to wait about 5 seconds for it to get to speed.
No. Go ahead.
In addition to traveling around the state giving talks, I was asked by the People's Voice, which was a very good little newspaper, I thought, published by my old friend Harry Billings from Helena, and read by people of goodwill. He asked me to do a series on what I had been talking about to the farmers. In other words, put it in writing as well as words, spoken word. And I wrote about 5 pieces. They would be 2-3 pages of the paper. And I got a good response. Mind you, it turned up in my Freedom of Information Act material I got from the FBI that they mentioned the fact that I was writing those articles. At that time, for some strange reason, the government considered one more sort of subversive, dealing with this subject. Well, I remember one incident that occurred in the Paxson School. This shows you how controversial this situation was. There was the school board arranged for the civil defense director. I don't know, maybe some of you remember that every county had a civil defense director in those days. That's just before the fallout shelter hysteria. And this was, I'd have been here about a year or two. I didn't have any tenure or anything. I should have. It's amazing that it's a comment on the fairness of my colleagues and the administration at the University of Montana, that they did not take exception to what I was doing. Anyway, the civil defense director, who was a lady, was asked to talk about radioactive fallout at our Paxton School, where we had 2 children, and they were getting into this business of, having them crouch under the... They were going to do that. I think we still wouldn't allow it at Paxton, but they were doing it all over the country, having these air raid drills and getting these little kids, first, second, third graders, are terrifying them, putting them under, the bomb's going to come. Anyway, she made an asinine speech and obviously didn't know anything. And somebody said, well, what about radioactivity in plants? And I'll never forget this. She said, radioactivity only affects living things. It doesn't affect plants. Well, I'm a biologist. I could not stand that. So I said to the chairman, would you please allow me to explain how incorrect the civil defense lady is. I took over, made a speech for about 20 minutes on plants and radioactivity and animals and that sort of thing. And of course, she got absolutely furious, and the principal almost got fired. She never said anything to me, but there was a lot of it. And then that started rumors about Professor Pfeiffer amongst some of the local Lions Club people, and I started to get a kind of a reputation. It was two ways. Some people thought it was great, what I was doing, and others found it un-American. And anyway, that's the sort of, we went down to Hamilton and lectured in Stevensville and all around. Well, in due time, Barry Common and I got to working quite closely together. At one time, he even asked me to go leave the university and work for him, and I considered it seriously. But our relationship came to a peak in 1963 when he and the great anthropologist Margaret Mead organized, they got the money from, we'll get into where some of that money came from later, but they got the money to organize a conference to set up an institute. The conference was held at the Rockefeller Institute. It was a very prestigious institute in New York City, and I was very, very pleased to be asked, along with my colleague Mike Chesson, who had helped me a lot, and he did a lot of, being a plant physiologist, he did quite a bit of speaking too. And we were both invited to the Rockefeller Institute, courtesy of the Commoner Mead Group. And we spent about 3 days organizing this institute, which was finally called the Scientist Institute for Public Information. Margaret Mead ultimately became the president, and the chairman of the board became Barry Commoner. I was honored to be nominated and elected as a charter board member from the floor of the conference, and there were a couple of hundred people there, I guess, and about 12 of us on the board. And the purpose of the institute was, I have copies of the original report defining the purpose, but essentially it was to get out information on scientific matters affecting the public in an unbiased, objective fashion. That was very important to keep it objective. And since we'd all been doing work on fallout and radioactivity, we obviously all of the talks at the conference were about this problem, and that was the main thrust of our work in the beginning years. I recall at that conference, one of the observers was an official from the U.S. Public Health Service, very nice guy. And he came up and we were talking, and he said, well, you know, you people like Commoner and other scientists like yourself, we have a great respect for you, because we think in Washington that you people made it possible through educating the public and the way you did it, convincing them, you know, that you were acting as honest scientists. You created a climate of public opinion that allowed Congress to ratify that highly controversial nuclear test ban treaty. And he said, it was interesting, I look back on it, that we would like your help in other matters of public concern. And we'll talk about the ramifications of that. It just occurred to me a little later on. I mean, if you have a controversial problem in the environment, get some independent group to do the government's propaganda for it, essentially was what he was saying. Except we were not doing propaganda. We were doing, as I said, popular science discussions of radioactive fallout and nuclear bomb testing. Well,
Good place to stop for a minute.
It is, the tape's about time, too.
Oh, good, okay.